Hello and welcome to a Pint of Cthulhu Behind the Bar. We have a new guest today from Nerd RPG Variety Cast. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us at such short notice. Funny enough, other Jason recommended you, and we just had to jump on the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you say other Jason. Of course, we're talking about Jason Weeb of the Dungeon Plunger, but you know we both. I'll probably butcher your questions here if I give you background to that Jason, other Jason. I don't know if you want me to hold that or.
No, go for it.
Go for it.
So,
whatever you want.
So this podcast community that I came from, that he joined, and then he mentioned to you during his interview, the Anchorite community, you know, it started, I don't know, probably 2017, 2018, and it was just a group that it got together. You know, they're mainly talking about OSR games at the time. There were other games they talked about, and they had set up a Discord server, and they kind of called themselves the OSR Anchorites at that point. And then later it changed to RPG Anchorites to be a little more inclusive, so people weren't chased away by the OSR part, and then later just Anchorites. But one of the early people in there was Jason Hobbs of Hobbs and Friends, and a few other podcasts. And so he was like the original Jason. So when I started podcasting, I was the other Jason. And in fact, if you listen to the theme song in my first season, it calls me the other Jason in that theme song. And then of course Jason Weeb comes in, and you know he's yet another Jason, right? So anyway,
Yeah, fair play.
Matt, you can start us off with the usual first question.
Yeah, go for it. So the first question we ask every guest, regardless of who they are, where they're from, what they do, is if you could say a pint of Cthulhu was any kind of drink, what would it be?
So I did cheat. I listened to a couple of your interviews ahead of time, but I'm going to give you the answer that popped in my head when I very first heard this question, instead of coming up with a super good answer. So my answer would be a shoot. Now you're going to have to edit, and I apologize because I just brain
That's
farted.
fine.
It's all good.
Keep it going.
What am I thinking of? What do you do when you do gin and lime and
Mojito?
No, not a mojito. Old style drink for like naval drink. What? Crap.
Gin and lime.
Hold on.
71 gin.
A gimlet?
Gimlet.
Yeah.
Gimlet. Sorry. Okay. So now we'll pick back up. See, I'm already being difficult guest.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, it's fine.
But my first thought was a gimlet because it uses gin, and of course we all know gin is a healthy liquor.
Of course.
Then of course but we need to have that kind of tentacle theme in there. So I was thinking you could take calamari, and not breaded, but take some calamari and stick a couple calamari, a couple legs in there, or tentacles in there, floating in your gimlet, and that was kind of my thought.
I always picture when people add calamari to it, a shrimp cocktail where they're all just lying on the edge.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's tentacles spilling out of your drink.
I'm adding that to the list. There we
No.
go.
So, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay. My name's Jason. I do a RPG-centric podcast called the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, but I also cover other things. I cover exploitation movies. We'll talk about novels. We'll talk about just a variety of different things. We've talked about board games and war games before. Kind of like nerd culture and gaming, but also where it crosses over into books and movies, comics, things like that. I'd have to go back and count. There's a bit over 700 episodes now. It started in 2019. And then last year I decided to reboot the podcast, or maybe it was earlier this year. I think it was last year. And anyway, I was at a point where we had built onto the house and we moved my mom in with us, which is, I'm not complaining at all, but because of work things, my time got a little bit more tight and it was harder to do the show. And one of the other things with the show at the time, while I've always had guests on and done interviews and things like that, a lot of the episodes were just me alone, kind of as a talking head. And that was getting old. So I thought about stopping podcasting, but a number of people reached out and said, no, don't stop. And so what I did is I rebooted the show in season 2, where at least all the main episodes, I have a guest of some sort on there. And I might be interviewing a game creator, or I might be talking to another podcaster about a topic, but I'm trying to always have a guest on. Now, I have some bonus episodes between the main episodes where, it might just be me talking or me answering call-in, phone calls, things like that. But for the most part now, there's always a guest on the show, which makes it a lot easier. But, I've had, a fair number of important people on the show, which is good, RPG-wise. And I've had tons of guests, and it's just been a great time. And then what made Anchor special back in the day, it was bought by Spotify, and Spotify, of course, ruined this. But Anchor at the time was a free service, and it was set up where you could set an app on your phone, and you could record on your phone and publish your podcast all from your phone. And you could also, in the app, hit a button to call in a message to another podcast. So what it did is let podcasters call into each other easily and record those segments and have a lot of cross communication that you could publish in your own shows. And because you could do everything from your phone, it was very friendly to people that might not be able to own a laptop or might not have a PC, and the phone was their only access to the internet. And of course, Spotify bought it, did away with a number of those features, and actually now with the Spotify, you can't even publish from your phone. You have to publish from a laptop or a PC. So they've kind of cut out a big segment of the market because, I'm very fortunate to live in America. I, do fine money-wise, all that. But there are a number of people where they're stuck with a, fairly inexpensive phone as their only access to the internet. And by changing that, they've cut them out from being able to put podcasts out, at least with that application they have.
So that brings up something quickly, because the other Jason, Dungeon Plumber, was saying that you guys have a lot of guerrilla podcasters out there that just do it straight off the phone and things like that. So to hear you say that that's been cut out completely, that is generally a shame, because a lot of people now can't put stuff up, I guess. Yeah,
right. And if you think about it, when you move into other countries, especially if you go to Central South America and Africa, place in Asia, a phone may be the only device people have. And it's, when it started, a lot of us did everything on the phone. And then, you could still record segments on your phone and upload it and publish it through your laptop, which is what some of the podcasters do now. Some of the anchorites do. Or like now, I tend to record everything on the laptop myself. But I still kind of do the guerrilla thing where very limited editing. And then, as you can see, I'm using the ear pods that came with my iPhone. Is that, I don't have a fancy microphone or any of that. And I just use Audacity. And I do pay for a Zoom account because I use that for gaming as well. And then I record interviews on Zoom. But like I say, I like to run games through Zoom as well. Because back in the day, it was a lot stabler than Discord, and Roll20 was horrible as far as the audio and video for a long time. So
Discord's getting dodgy again these days.
Yeah, it's 50-50 on some days where it actually works and when it doesn't. So, a question I need to ask you. Where did you get your theme song? Because that is absolutely incredible. Who sings that?
So a gentleman, TJ, sings it, and due to his job, he doesn't identify with his last name or anything anymore. But TJ is great. He's actually done a few small podcasts on his own, but he did the theme songs for a lot of the anchorites, a lot back in the day. And so you'll hear a number of shows. Keep Off the Borderlands, done by a gentleman named Spencer Freethraw. A number of them have theme songs from TJ. And yeah, he does a great job, and I'm also fortunate. Another person in that community is Ray Otis, who's maybe a little wider known because he did like the Gygax 75 challenge, and he's done some lasers and feelings hacks that have gotten pretty wide publicity. But Ray Otis did the coffee cup clip art on my show, so that coffee cup, pouring the coffee, that he did that for me, which is nice. And he's actually been on my show a couple times as a guest, if you look through the back catalog.
Nice. So, what TTRPGs have you played? And what are your favourites among them?
I've played a lot of them. So I started playing in 1984. and with, like most people of my age range, with the Mentor D&D Red Box set for the Beckme D&D sets. And then I quickly moved on with my friends to other TSR games. So we played Marvel Superheroes, Gamma World, Top Secret, all the different TSR games. And then we moved into Middle-earth role-playing, MERP, and then the Palladium games. And played over the years most things. It might be more interesting to hear what I haven't played. I've never actually played Shadowrun. Oh. I've never done any of the White Wolf games. I own Street Fighter. Street Fighter is the only White Wolf game I own. During that time, I was playing Cyberpunk 2020. That was the big game for us at that time, Cyberpunk 2020, and we were still playing D&D, AD&D First Edition, actually. And I lived in Washington State during the 90s. I was in the Army at the time, stationed up at Fort Lewis. And so those were the games we were playing, were Cyberpunk and just AD&D. I never played 4th edition D&D. I have played 5th edition a couple times, but most of my D&D experiences is 1st edition and the basic. But I've played a variety of different games, everything from like Swords Without Masters to, which is all the way on the very edge of being a game and more being just telling stories together. Great game though. To, I don't know, I played Powered by the Apocalypse games and Savage Worlds and, most of the games I've given a shot here or there.
We'll have to get you to write down a recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for a recommendation, I'm still a big Cyberpunk 2020 fan. I'm still a big Top Secret First Edition fan from 1980. I still like that. I've run that and played that at conventions. There's a game that, unfortunately, it's really hard to find. You won't find a PDF of it out there anywhere. But there's a Canadian game from the 80s called Night of the Ninja. And it was supposed to be, like all those ninja movies that came out in the 80s, like American Ninja and the ones with Sho Kosugi and things like that. Well, it was to cash in on those. And so you're playing ninjas in the 1980s. And I found that, and I bought a copy, and then I bought another copy, and I turned on a friend to it, Joe Salvador, who of Raven God Games, who's just did a successful Kickstarter for Reaver. He bought a copy, and then I gave my copy to another friend, Daniel Norton of Bandits Keep. He's got a big YouTube channel, and he's done podcasting before. But anyway, we've got 3 copies of Night of the Ninja, and then the price went up. So if you can find it now, you'll probably have to pay through the nose for this thing. But it's actually a fairly lightweight game, and it works really well. It's a deep percentile game, and it's for an 80s game, it's surprisingly lightweight. And who doesn't want to play ninjas, doing espionage missions and things. I've done missions where, like prisoner rescue, like rescuing prisoners or all kinds of different things. But yeah, but I'll play anything. I'm more of a social gamer. I enjoy playing with other people and the interaction with the other players. So that's kind of my jam. So the game system's kind of secondary to the group for me. If I like a group, I'll play a game even if I don't like the mechanics.
Oh, that's fair enough. Who wrote Night of the Ninja, by the way?
Give me a second, and I'll let you know.
Because now I'm going to be on the hunt for that.
Yeah.
Because I've got one here, Max Alberts? Alberts?
No, it's IIE Games Corporation out of Canada. I will... IIE. Yeah, I'll send you a link.
Hey, Matt.
Nice one. I'll have a look at that later. Mm-hmm.
Found it.
Have you found it? Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Dare I ask the price?
$45 US dollars, but plus postage, which will be extortionate, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I have to ask, you mentioned something earlier, the Gygax 75. Mm-hmm. What is that?
So Gygax 75, so back, and I'm going to muddle my facts here, unfortunately, so I apologize for that. But in one of the early gaming magazines, Gary Gygax wrote an article about how to set up a dungeon in a week. How to do, or not just a dungeon, but world creation in a week. And step by step. This day 1 you do this, day 2 you do that. So what Rayotis did is he kind of modernized that challenge. And he changed it from doing one thing a day to one thing a week. And so if you Google Gygax 75, Rayotis, it should pop up. I think he has it on his itch page. And he has copied the entire Gary Gygax article, and it's in the back of the Gygax 75 challenge. so you can read the original article, but you can read this challenge where the idea is basically world creation so it's about a month because you do, one step a week. And it's kind of a cool, world creation kind of thing for OSR games. I mean, you could use it for any game.
That sounds really familiar. I think someone else does something like that. There's like a dungeon a day or something.
So the past couple of years, there was a thing that came out where they did the dungeon a day, where it was basically you did one dungeon room a day for the entire year for 365 days. That was a challenge that went, maybe that was 2 years ago now, but yeah.
Nice. So what are some memorable or especially funny moments from your podcast?
That is a hard question. It's good because there's so many episodes. I've had some great, like I say, I've had some great guests on there. Some of my fondest memories are, I've done two St. Patrick's Day episodes, and for both those, basically we did open mic. And the first one especially, and I'd have to go back and tell you the first one was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I just did a Zoom call and had it open, and we probably had, throughout the conversation, like 2 hours, we probably had 10 or 12 people come in and leave, and just kind of this rolling conversation that was good. This last one I did this year just had 2 people in there, but both those were fun because we got pissed while we were recording, and so those were a lot of fun. Maybe the memorable in a negative way. there have been a couple times that I probably misspoken and said things, and you'll see if you look through the catalog, you'll see an episode to say apology and things like that. I'm one of those people that, I'm not proud if I screw up, but at the same time, once you put something on the internet, it's out there. And I've never really enjoyed the idea of going back and re-editing the shows after they've been published, or changing things or taking things down. I mean, if there was something heinous, or if a guest reached out to me and said, hey, can you pull this episode down? I would do that if a guest asked me to, out of respect to the guest. But if I say something stupid, and I'll issue an apology for it, but I'm not going to pull the episode down, because I kind of think there's value to having that ongoing record.
Yeah, you stand by your work.
Yeah.
That's fair play.
One of the funnier things, so one of the other podcasters who's kind of stopped podcasting now, Colin Green, also known as Spike Pit, and he had done some YouTube, and he did a number of audio podcasts. But there's a few weeks or maybe a month or so, where I lost my voice. And so the first episode I put out after I lost my voice is I got online to one of the sites where you could type in text and it would read it out, kind of like a robot voice. And I put an episode out like that, and then he sent me a series of calls, basically acting as the host of my show, and anticipating questions, and knowing that my shows, especially back then, had a certain sequence. Like, I'd do an introduction and then play calls and then do this. And so I got to do a show with basically where he, hosted for me, but it would, we didn't coordinate it. He had just kind of set it in, anticipating how the show would go, and that was kind of neat. It was fun to make that work, smoothly.
That sounds like quite a clever little idea there. Okay, so what are some of the best and worst parts of running a podcast for you?
The best part are talking to the other people, whether it is people doing phone calls and my responding to that, whether it's having a guest on and be able to have that interaction back and forth, or even emails back and forth with people that listen. That's, to me, the best part is that social part of it. The worst part, although it's minimized for me, is just the back room part of it, the editing and the putting it together and all that kind of thing. Like I say, I try to do minimal editing to keep that down, but sometimes there's there can be quite a bit, as I'm sure you know. So
all too well, unfortunately, all too well.
Yeah. So, in that vein, what kind of editing and post-production process do you go through?
So, I'll record the show, and then I've got the theme songs, and I've got some certain canned things I'll put in, I don't always do it, but TJ has recorded me a number of different things. Like he has a intro to my phone calls where he has a little song to introduce phone calls, and usually I'll play that on the call-in episodes. And then I've got some not interrupts, but like intermission kind of just little transition pieces that I've gotten over the years, and so I'll play those. And so I'll record the episode, and then I'll have those canned things, and I'll insert those in. I use Audacity, so I'll have my main recording in Audacity, and then I'll add the on either end and cut it up and put the things in, and then I'll listen to the whole thing. Although I cheat, I'll listen at like 1.5 speed, and then cut out anything too egregious, and then I'll take that. I publish that as a WAV file, and I've got I don't know if the software is supported anymore. I use a Mac. There's an app called Levelator, and it's basically just leveling software where you can sit there and it'll take all the audio and kind of get it to about the same level. Because sometimes when people call in, it's a lot lower volume or a lot higher volume, than the standard conversation. So that'll kind of levels out the sound quality, so it's all about the same. And then I'll take that and with Spotify, because I'm lazy, I still use Spotify, even though they kind of I don't particularly like them anymore. But with them, you upload the file, and then you just put your show notes in and whatnot, and you set it to publish.
Nice.
Fair. So, you've done this for quite a while then, by the sounds of it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share any tips or advice for someone who's interested in starting their own podcast?
Yeah, don't be afraid of it, and don't overthink it. If you already have, a laptop or PC, I'm sure there are services out there, and a number of Sankrites looked for it when they removed some of the things from Anchor. We hadn't found a satisfactory replacement, but by now there may be one. So there might be a way to do it just from your phone. But if you have a computer, you can podcast, and it doesn't have to cost you anything. There are services like Spotify that will do it for free. You can get, like, Audacity's free. So, all the tools you really need, you already have. You don't need a fancy mic. You don't need... it sounds a little bit better if you have the fancy mic and things. But, honestly, people are tuning in to hear you talk and hear maybe your guests or whatnot. You're not doing... Or maybe you are... Like, for you guys, you do actual plays. So the good mics and things like that are more important for what you're doing. But if it's just a talk show, then that extra audio piece isn't as big a deal, honestly. So if you're not worried about actual play, but if you're just doing a talk show, then really you don't need to buy any special equipment to get started. The other thing is, don't be afraid to look for guests. If there's somebody you want to interview or you're curious about, reach out to them. In the RPG industry especially, people tend to be pretty friendly. And even big names that you think, oh, they'd never talk to me. Well, they might. Reach out and ask. It's, the worst thing you can do is say no or not respond. But more often than not, I bet they'll say, sure, I'll come on your show. And, so don't be afraid to do that. I would say try to get maybe, 4 or 5 episodes. Maybe you don't need that many, but have 3 to 5 episodes already recorded before you launch your first one. Because if you're being on a set schedule is important. And, and you don't have to do every week. You could do every other week, or you could do once a month. But having 1 or 2 extra in the can is very helpful, because if you get busy and backlogged, it's better to be a little bit ahead than to miss a show or two, because then you'll start losing. I don't really worry about listener numbers, honestly, but personally, because I'm doing it more just because I enjoy it. I'm not as worried about building a brand or making money off it. But especially if you're trying to build a brand with it, you need that consistency, and you need to publish on schedule.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I know you've collaborated with an absolute ton of other podcasters and creators. Mind listing off a couple?
Yeah, I've had Phil Reed on. Phil Reed you see a ton of Kickstarters from Phil Reed. He was, I don't know if he's like the line editor. He was a big wig before he retired with Steve Jackson Games. you do like GURPS and Munchkin, all that kind of thing. So I had Phil Reed on there. I've had, I don't even remember. But most of the people I've had on have been people that have done, Kickstarters and RPGs and things like that. Like I said, I've had Joe Salvador on. He just recently did a great Kickstarter for Reimer, which is Sword and Sorcery RPG that'll be coming out. That you can get. I think the quick start version of that's still available. But yeah, I should have anticipated this question. I didn't. Like I said, Daniel Norton of Bandits Keep has been on a number of times. I'm gonna forget people, and that's not fair to them, and I apologize. But yeah, I've had. I don't know. It's late in the day. We need to record in the morning for me to remember that.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, what is then next for your show? What kind of are you planning on doing? A third season anytime, or any kind of different system or spin-off type of thing?
I don't know. I've tried to do the blog thing a little bit, but blogging is hard. It's a lot harder than just talking into the void, to be honest. So I've tried to launch a blog a couple times, and I've got one now that I'm doing, but and obviously it's there, but it's not getting very many views, and not getting a lot of traction. And it's actually harder to find time to write than it is to just kind of pontificate or to get a guest on, because then you can just riff off the guest. But I'd like to maybe do that at some point. I don't know about third season, because I'm pretty happy with having guests on each episode and just bouncing off the guest. So I don't know that that'll change. I don't really have a big desire to get into YouTube and do all that right now. Maybe years down the road when I retire, I can look at something like that. So right now, I think it's more just keeping the course and finding interesting guests and having interesting conversations.
Yeah, fair, man.
Nope, and here are the dogs.
Oh. Hello.
Well, now we've got to ask, what kind of dogs have you got?
Well, they're both mutts. They're both rescues. One's kind of like a... I don't know what she is. I guess she's kind of like a golden retriever, and the other's a... He looks like a little black lab. He's not. I'm not sure what he is, but he looks like a 3/4 size black lab. But they're really good dogs. But they heard my wife come in, so that's why you saw them jet across the screen there.
Oh.
No, they're great. That's the other thing with like guerrilla podcasting, where a lot of times, because we'd record on the phones, you'd be outside and you would hear the noises outside. Whether it's cars going by or birds or whatever, or you hear the dogs barking, or I'd like record segments, throwing the ball for Maddie, and you'd hear them bark in the background and stuff. Now recording on the laptop, you don't hear them as often, which is kind of a shame, I think. But it's the price.
We'll make sure we keep them in for you.
Yeah.
Jay, do you want to draw this to a close then?
Sure. So how about you just tell us where to find you? Anything you want to plug?
Sure. I don't really have anything to plug, honestly. I'll give you the link, but if you look for Nerds RPG Variety Cast, it's on most of the major podcast platforms. You can find Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on a variety of places. The one place it's not is YouTube, and probably I should remedy that at some point. But yeah, no, I don't really have anything to plug though. I know.
Well, we'll let you get back on with your day and your lovely dogs by the sounds of it. They want your attention. Thank you very much for joining us for the time you have. We do genuinely really appreciate it. Send us your blog link. We'll pop that in the description as well for you.
Okay, will do.
But yeah, thank you very much for your time. This has been The Pint of Cthulhu, interviewing Jason from Nerds RPG Variety. Signing off. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.